So this event today, like I say, is really about talking about taking a project right through from that kind of initial pitching through to screen. So we've got a few people here with us today who are going to be able to talk about that really brilliantly. So hosting the event today is Nev Pierce. He's a journalist, screenwriter and director with a really successful track record in shorts. He's also one of the consultants on the Pitch Fund. We're also joined by the rest of the team behind Hollow. So Hollow was successful in securing funding through the Pitch Fund a little while back, and they've just finished the film. So they're at that final stage now of distributing and getting it out in front of audiences, which I'm sure they'll talk to us about. So here today we've got Laura Baston, who's the lead actor in the short, a brilliant actor and also a writer and up-and-coming sort of director herself. We've got Jackie Shepherd, who's a producer at Footprint Films, but also a consultant sort of producer on the film, the Pitch Film Fund, who's here today. We've got Luke Bolton, who's the producer, acted as a producer on Hollow, but also is a director of the Pitch Fund, so really the one who know all about that. And we've also got Paul Holbrook, who's the writer and director behind Hollow. Great. So I'm going to hand over to you, Nev, now, if that's okay. And I will be here in the background helping out, and I will come back and join the panel in a little bit. Thanks.
Great. Thanks very much, Alex. So yeah, welcome everybody. Great to be here. Excited to be talking to the team. Now, I want to start with, obviously, we're going to talk about, going from the germ of an idea to a finished film and all the stages along the way. I'll start with you, Paul, and your first encounter with the pitch, when you first heard about it. And you, well, actually, let's talk about Hollow. Can you tell us a little bit about Hollow, and then we'll come on to how you first got involved in the pitch?
Yeah, what do you want? Like what it's about, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Hollow, it's a revenge thriller about a single parent that's struggling with the loss of her child to a drunk drive accident. She's also a woman of faith, and she's beginning to really struggle with these the internal conflict that comes with these thoughts of hate and revenge and violence that are bubbling away inside her. So she seeks guidance from her local vicar, who happens to be a black guy that's also getting racially abused on the housing estate in which he serves. And these two kind of connect and go headlong towards the finale of the film. Yeah. Any good?
Yeah. Cracking. Well, I know the film's very good. When you first heard about the pitch, how did you hear about it, and what were your first impressions of the fund?
I actually first heard about it, Nev, because you told me about it. But you told me about it the year before I actually entered. So yeah, I heard about it in regards to there's a fund, they've got a pocket full of money that they want to put into a film, so let's get something in. But yeah, that first year that I first heard about it, I just didn't really have an idea that I thought I could genuinely and honestly pitch with any sense that I would win. It would have essentially been kind of a dishonest pitch, and then I just kind of got thinking between the first year that I didn't enter and then the year I did, in regards to, because obviously part of the pitch is your pitches should be inspired by something in the Bible, whether that be a passage or a story or something as simple as a moral or whatever, I'm sure Luke can talk about that side of it. But so yeah, that seed of kind of inspiration about what the pitch was about was just in my head for that whole year. And I was always intending on kind of wanting to make, so like my thing is kind of merging kind of subgenres of cinema with grounded kind of real world morals, visuals, So I always wanted to do a kind of a revenge thriller, but I didn't really have kind of any sort of inspiration or impetus to turn that kind of want into a fully fledged story. And I was working on it for a while with Laura in mind always. And then kind of 3 months before the next kind of window of submission opened, I literally just Googled revenge and the Bible, and then just read a load of stuff about, what the Bible was saying about this kind of stuff. And then that started kind of fueling the inspiration and the kind of personal, intricate, emotional conflicts I was having about the same sort of stuff. And then suddenly the idea just grew and grew and grew. And then suddenly I felt a bit more confident to pitch with it, because yeah, I wouldn't have been pitching dishonestly anymore. I had something that I felt had meat on the bone.
So when you say pitching dishonestly the previous year, was that because you had maybe film ideas which you could have reverse engineered, but your heart wouldn't have been in it? It wouldn't have been an honest engagement with the text, or?
Not necessarily even just the text, but the panel themselves. I think, like, you can learn kind of the art of pitching. You can listen to gurus or look online and find all this kind of stuff, and I could have probably maneuvered my way through a pitch that sounded like a movie, or sounded like a solid idea that could have held a movie up. But I wouldn't have been able to sell myself as the filmmaker I wouldn't have been able to sell myself as a storyteller or a filmmaker if it was just a bog standard movie idea. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, yes, there's a story, there's a beginning, middle, and end. Yes, it all makes sense. Yes, I can probably form a pitch out of it and throw you some fancy visuals, but yeah, you wouldn't have got my heart with it, if that makes any sense.
It's kind of potentially a lesson there for any type of pitching, regardless of, pitching to the pitch fund or just pitching in general, is not to, it's always tempting to just go after what you think the audience is going to want, but ultimately you're the one who's going to have to tell the story and your heart has to be in it in some way, I guess. Luke, if we can come to you next. You've been running the pitch since 2009.
Yes.
I think that's right.
About the Middle Ages, really. Yeah.
Yeah. What was the inspiration behind the pitch, and how has the pitch changed over the years from what it first was to what it is now?
Yeah, great question. The inspiration for it was I was involved in running a film festival called Big Story Little Film. Same principle. It was an idea to draw in some films that had taken inspiration from Bible and Bible stories or characters or themes. And while we were doing that, it was a great experience to run a festival in a city, and Manchester's a great place, I know it well. During that, I discovered that someone had actually put forward the idea originally that what we do is invite submissions of ideas and then work out the best idea and help the filmmakers to develop a stronger concept with it and to work with them so that we raise the game, as it were. And I just love that idea. It's a subtly different one. I think festivals play an important part in our industry, but I think it was a step towards the production side rather than, in a sense, the distribution side. And that's, festivals in a way occupy that distribution space, that awareness. And I know there's a lot that goes on at festivals that's collaborative, but I just really fell in love with the idea, and I thought, well, gosh, we should have been doing that all along. So when everybody went, yeah, the festival's brilliant, we loved it, absolutely brilliant, you should do more of that, I said, well, we'll do more, but slightly different. And so basically I just said, yes, I'll take your money and we'll do something different. And that's how we started with this. And how's it developed? Well, I think we've added layers to it. I'm a terrible kleptomaniac in all sorts of ways. And basically when another good idea comes up, I kind of go, oh, it'd be great if we could just have a session on feedback, or if only we could do a residential with our finalists so that we can help them develop their idea, think about how they're pitching it, develop the story a bit more beforehand. All of those things would add to it. So we've gone on adding all the way through, and I think that's one of the ways it's developed. Plus, it's been great to see more and more people in the industry coming in and offering their services on the panel and in terms of the development process, masterclasses and so on. So it's a richness that's come along, and our filmmakers, the community of people who know us and have worked with us, but also those who've met each other. It's been wonderful to see people get together and make stuff, even if they haven't been making it with us. They've become teams in their own right. So there are all sorts of different ways I think it's developed.
There's some great questions coming in, which I'm going to come to, but I've got one more question for you, Luke, and then Jackie and Laura. In terms of how the fund works, just in terms of nuts and bolts, if I come along going, I've got an idea for a movie and I want to make it, what's the process and what are the stages? Yeah,
the process is that we ask for a submission online, so it's all online, even before COVID. Yes, just fits in with the times. And we've asked for a 2-minute video pitch, and that can be a talking head, it can be a storyboard, it can be a single shot, it can be, some people do elaborate trailers. It's what takes your fancy for selling your idea. It can be a concept, mood reel type thing. And there's some written materials, and all of that's available on the website. And then the stages that follow that are a series of selections. So we do have a wider number of submissions, then we put a number of them into consideration, and they go to another panel. of peers who select a shortlist, and the shortlist is presented to our industry panel of judges, and they select the filmmakers they want to see live in the room. And there's a live event at the end of this, which at the moment is being hosted by the National Film and Television School. So it's great to have John Wardle on the panel over the last few years as one of the members of the panel alongside others. So there is a live pitching session that comes at the end when we torture people like Paul Holbrook and make him speak to people and just generally be terrified. Yeah.
Well, actually, I want to come to that later with Paul and his experience of the finals weekend and what that was like, the highs and the lows. But before then, just Jackie, if I can come to you. Each year, you and Luke work with the winning picture to make their film, but you are not on the judging panel. So you're kind of, the judges pick the filmmaker and go, here you are. And I'm sure some years that's brilliant, and some years like, oh, I don't love this quite so much. So what is it that you look for? What makes you excited when you get a filmmaker given to you? What gives you confidence in them as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I think the thing about it is that we've been through a process with them by that stage. So we've probably met them a couple of times, as Luke has alluded to. We have a residential weekend in the Lake District, so we spend time with the filmmakers. So actually, in Paul's year, I remember we had a couple of hours free one afternoon, or an hour free, and I thought, brilliant, nipping into Ambleside to go and do my Christmas shopping. And Paul said, can I come with you? And actually we went and we just sat in a coffee shop in Ambleside and just talked, and Paul told me what he wanted to do and what his ambition was as a filmmaker and all of that stuff. So I didn't do my Christmas shopping, but I did get to know Paul better, which was good. And you know that when they're chosen, they've not only been through a process, and we've seen them through that process of development. So you get a sense of which filmmakers can really grapple with notes and work on their projects and develop. And then, of course, so actually, by the time we get to the finals, I'm usually a little bit in love with all 10 of them, and I want them all to win. So I kind of don't really mind who wins. And I also know that when they win, it's not just right, let's go and make your film. We actually then sit down, and then the really hard work of development starts. So we know we're going to develop it, and because we want to make it the best product it can be for the filmmaker. So we're not just going to go, yeah, let's do it. It's not going to happen until we're sure they're ready to shoot it.
Laura, if I can come to you, you've worked with Paul a few times, but that didn't put you off coming back for Hollow. So what appealed to you about the material, and at what point did you hear about it and hear about Paul's involvement with the pitch?
Well, it would take a lot to put me off working with Paul, because he's an absolute legend, and I love everything that well, not all of it, but I do like most of what he writes, and the way that he directs is totally up my street. So we just kind of get each other, really. With regards to Hollow, I think I kind of came into it at the point when Paul asked me about how he was going to pitch it, and he had the idea of this 2-minute film, and he said he was going to do this, and this, and I'm going to say this, Laura, and I'm going to say that, and then I'm going to tell him this and tell him that. And I think I said to Paul, well, why don't we turn it around and we'll spin it into a monologue, and tell it from, I think this is right, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, we'll turn it into the character, and it will be her telling the story. And Paul, I love Paul, it's like, yeah, let's do it, let's write something. So we wrote this monologue. I think I wrote something, Paul kind of refined it because he's so good with his fancy words. And we then set about trying to film it as quickly as possible for as little money as possible. And we found an amazing guy in Bristol that we kind of knew. And we just ran around all the second-hand shops trying to find whatever we could find to try and, create this weird idea that we had that we thought would work, and we kind of did it, and we did it in an after. I think it took us about a day, Paul, maybe, with just one camera, one idea, one monologue, a couple of bits, and we just did it, and it worked, and it looked great. And that was when I came into it, and I just kind of didn't know quite what was going to happen after that. It was all in Paul's hands, and I thought, well, let him get on with it. Done my bit, and that was that for then. Yeah.
We'll come back to the process of then what happened after Paul received the pitch award and then you made the film. But it's quite appropriate you're talking about recording the monologue for the pitch, because the pitches themselves, when people send them in, do vary. And we've got a question here from Jennifer Bishop, who says, I've been going through the pitches in the archive on the website, and some of them are really elusive and do not tell the plot or even a log line or reveal the denouement. Do you ideally want a pretty succinct story summary told in a creative way, or is it okay for the text to fill in the gaps? That's probably a question for Luke, but feel free to chip in, anybody.
I'm sure Jackie will add some to this, but my thing is that I think if it's too elusive, then it's just, it might be very clever, but it doesn't sell to everybody. Remember, you're going to have, we actually have quite a lot of people on the moderation process. You get viewed over 20 times. And that means you've got to have a broad appeal in the way you're selling your story. What was really smart about the monologue approach, and it was a single shot as well, which was really beautiful, was that it sold both the tone and the story in a very simple way. And I really applaud that. I recognize that it's not necessarily simple to do, but it was with clarity and succinctness that it worked. But sometimes I say to people, you know, you may be best to give us a small piece of tone and something that very clearly states how the film is going to work and why you should make it. You can do it almost as 3 sections. Jackie, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think your latter thing there of those 3 sections is a good one. So, you know, some people do just choose to do teaser trailers, but I think it's quite helpful to know a little bit about you as to why you're the right person. But don't waste too much time on that, but knowing something of you, and also why the story is important to you. I think, yeah, those are the kind of crucial things to get across. But also don't forget, it's not just the trailers, because is it 500 words, 200 words that you can add to explain and unpack a little bit more about your trailer.
Yeah, we have written materials that require you to sort of do the outline of the story, to do the context of the material you're using and adapting, and a little bit about yourself. Why should we invest in you? So you have got those opportunities as well to put it on paper, but it's film, innit? So the way you actually use those 2 minutes probably says something about how you understand the medium.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something to say about Laura and Paul's work on Hollow. That entry was like, when I watched it, it was like, oh, it just immediately talked to me about, oh, here's a film, and here's a character that I'm really interested in. So it immediately, yes, it didn't give everything, but it had stuff in the supporting material. So it had one really strong thing, and because it was done so well, I think that worked. You know, that helped carry things through. Paul, in terms of when you went through the different stages of the pitch, so like, okay, my pitch is now in consideration. Oh, I've made the shortlist. Oh, I've made the finals. It's not just a question of going through to those different stages. There are also other things that happen alongside that. Do you remember what that process was like? Like
I don't think I remember exactly what all the stages were. Obviously, I remember the finals and everything that came with that. I think, if I'm right, Luke and Jackie will correct me, but I think once you get to the semi-finals or something, you're asked to then submit a longer pitch. Have I misremembered that, guys? Or you send a treatment in or something?
It's varied year on year, but I think that your year, did you have to submit a writing sample? Some years it's been a writing sample, some years it's been a sort of pitch deck, some years it's been a treatment.
Yeah, I think I had to submit a treatment, and then I submitted a treatment and kind of a little pitch deck with it, I think. And maybe around the semi-final stage. And then the final, you were going somewhere in the finals, if I remember rightly? Yeah, there's finals weekends then.
Yeah, the
And
finals
then
weekend.
there's another weekend. I had 2 weekends with you guys, didn't I?
Yeah, the pitch residential weekend, which is where we work with you on developing your ability to pitch and B, your actual story.
Yeah, so we had a finals weekend at the Posh Hotel. That's where I got to know you guys and more about the process that was going to be happening next, almost like a prep for it. And to kind of calm everybody down, I suppose. And then it was the actual finals weekend at NFTS. That was it. Yeah. And
how much does nerves play a part in this kind of process? And certainly when you come to the finals and you're like, man, we're going to come on to pitching in the industry in general, because this is kind of a unique situation where you're standing in front of a room of people. Certainly in the UK, it's not something I've ever done. I think it's more of a thing they do in the States.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
Without a shadow of a doubt, that's the most nervous I've ever been in my entire life. Without a shadow of a doubt. Probably I was more, because you get 2 shots at it, right? So you pitch to a room of God knows how many people. I don't know. I kind of just zoned out and looked at the panel, but I know there were people here, and I was just like, I'm not going to look over there. So I can remember pitching to the panel, and I was so nervous. And then you get announced that you're in the top 3, and then you come back and you have a longer crack at it, right? The second time I wasn't as nervous, because I kind of already felt like a bit of a winner, like, do you know what I mean? Just getting in the top 3. I was just kind of like, oh, okay, well, they like it. They must like it enough to select me in the top 3. So why be nervous? Let's just go in and answer their questions and give them a bit more detail. And yeah, it works out all right. So yeah, I wasn't nervous when there was so much at stake, when there was only 3 of you left. But when there was 10 of us left, I was incredibly nervous. Yeah, I didn't sleep all night.
Jackie, in terms of this process for the pitch weekend, I mean, I know that everyone makes an effort to make it as unintimidating as possible, but and there's various. Some people are very happy chatting in front of a room full of people. Some people find it incredibly scary. But how does that process compare for what you have to do as a producer, where I know that people will pitch to you, story directors and writers, but also you have to pitch to financiers? How does this compare to that?
It, as you said earlier, it is a slightly weird construct, because the pitcher comes into a room where there is a panel of people sat in front of them. And yes, there are a few people over here, including Luke and myself and my producing partner, who are all trying to send waves of empathy towards the pitcher, and just go on, you can do it. But it's a slightly unnatural thing, because you come into the room and wham, you're just right. You've got your 20 minutes or whatever, off you go. Whereas normally, of course, when you're pitching to industry, you'd walk into the room and you'd have that few minutes of warming up where you talk about the weather, or where you've just been on holiday, or if you're really lucky, about the film that you just made and how that's gone or not gone and all that kind of stuff. So you sort of get to know people a little bit, whereas this is a slightly different thing. And yes, they do have those panels in America where it's just like a kind of stream of people who come in, and you could be actually facing 10 or 20 people in front of you. I've got friends who've done that, and I just can't imagine how terrible that would be. But the other thing about pitching to the Pitch Film Fund is that everybody wants you to do well. So even though the judges are there to work out who is going to get the fund at the end of the day, they likewise are always wanting to be encouraging, which has not necessarily always quite the case when you're pitching out there in the world. And I have been in pitches where people have just said to me, well, that was a pretty crap idea. I'll get my coat. So yeah, it's an artificial construct, but people want you to do well.
Laura, you've obviously will have auditioned as an actor, and I know you write as well. How do you prepare for going into a room where you feel like inherently people are, well, they're going to judge you? What do you do when you're preparing for that yourself?
Well, I try and put all of that kind of stuff aside, really. It's not about that. It's about preparing for what's been put in front of you. The script, the character, their little emotional journey for that little segment that you've got. what your interpretation of that character is, where you believe it should fit within the, you know, what the sides that you've got. Sometimes you don't get to read the whole script, you just get little tiny segments, so it's really hard sometimes because you can't really grasp truly what the tone of it is, but you have to get as much, you know, try and gauge as much as you can. Just to, I don't know, it's weird, just go in and present the best that you can, and prepare as much as you can. And, you know, I think if you can do those two things, what will be will be. You can't make somebody like you or what you're presenting. You're just presenting the best thing that you feel is right, and if it's not right, it's not right. If it is, it is. I don't know, I don't feel like I'm you know, I'm not an expert on it. There's, you know, everyone's experience is different.
Your advice does echo advice I heard from George Clooney when I interviewed him once, where he said that his attitude to auditions changed when he decided to come in going, I might have a solution for your problem, rather than going in thinking, oh, please, please, please give me a job. It's like, maybe it'll work, maybe this is what you want, maybe it won't. And that made, I think he said that changed his career somewhat.
Yeah. I think you've just got to, like, I worked with somebody very recently, and it was all about learning to just keep your foot on the pedal, but just let go of the steering wheel, keep going forward. But hell, who knows where you're going to go? And I think you just relax a little bit, and, you know, you might just travel into some path that you hadn't expected or even wanted, and it might be the one for you. So you've just got to, like, just go in and be really relaxed and go, do you know what? This is my interpretation. This is how I believe. You know, this is what I feel is right. And if you feel it's right from the soles of your feet to the tip of your head, then that is right. It's right. It might not be right for them, but hey, who knows what they want? You know, it's a very tough industry, and you've got to grow a very thick skin very quickly, or, you know, suffer the consequences.
It's good advice.
Yeah.
I want to bring Alex in a minute, talking about BFI Network and how they take in ideas. But just before we do that, Luke, when the pitch started, because I was a judge in the first few years, it was very much the finals weekend. You come and present an idea, and it was almost more of an X Factor kind of vibe. Is part of, like, the, you know, people talk about nerves and wanting to be supported. Is that one of the reasons why you brought in these other elements? So it would feel more like a journey rather than just being about a destination?
Yeah, I think we had a lot of respect, actually, for the BFI Network, really, in the way that they were working with development through an idea and the process of production. And we'd certainly put that in with the support of Jackie and Mark Blaney from Films, in terms of how we were supporting the production once we'd chosen to fund somebody. But the important bit was, as you say, the support for people in the process. From year one, we put in somebody who would be a mentor and for the people in the process, because I knew from folk I've been talking to in the industry that things like the aforementioned X Factor, for example, and others have definitely needed those people alongside people who are participating, because there is a pressure on it. And if it's a construct, you don't want that construct to be unhelpful. You want people to be able to lean into it and use it helpfully. But we've added extra elements so that people are gaining some experience regardless of the outcome, in a way. They're getting some feedback, they're getting some development, and that's why we want to add further elements. And we have feedback sessions at all the different stages. All of that's on the website too.
Great. And Alex, if I can come to you in terms of BFI Network and how you receive ideas, how do people first approach you, and then what's the process from then on?
Yeah, so we have like time deadlines in the same way that the pitch fund does. So we have 2 call outs a year. So it's currently closed. The next one opens, I think it's the 20th of August, so quite soon. And basically it's through the application portal. Though I would never encourage anyone to just put an application in without having some contact with us. I always sort of encourage people, so we have like bookable one-on-one slots where you can just jump on like a Zoom or a phone call with us, chat through your idea, kind of put anything to us that you don't understand about the application process. I think the first place to start is always to read our guidelines. and read them twice and just make sure you sort of fully understand what we're asking for as funders, what the BFI is here to do, and our priorities. There's a really good list of, I'll pop in the chat after this, of all of BFI's sort of main key sort of 5 priority areas, and then basically that's how we assess everything that comes from a short film right through to feature film production. And it's really important that you're sort of able to understand the sort of selection process that we make and why we pick the work that we pick. But yeah, I think mostly people tend to, because the stage that we help in terms of BFI Network is that more early career stage. So it tends to be at a point where people are kind of trying to make their sort of calling card short. So people will come to us, maybe they've done a couple of their own projects, either through sort of crowdfunding or through student work or just kind of through smaller funds. And then they kind of come to us when they want to do something that can help them really push themselves forward and kind of move on kind of past what we do. I'm sure Paul could probably talk about a little bit more. He's been through this process with us through his network funded short as part of BFI.
I knew I'd mute myself at one point. Well, maybe we should come to you then, Paul, actually, and talk about your experience with the BFI as well, and how that process was for you.
Yeah, I mean, it was good, different to the pitch, different. I think different ways of doing it, because a bit like Jackie said earlier on, the BFI's process is a bit more industry standard, where you're sitting down for a chat and you get to make friends before you have to slowly start unraveling your ideas to these decision makers. So it kind of does feel a bit more like a, just a more industry standard process. It doesn't feel like you're not really pitching to the BFI. It's a conversation that grows eventually into a film idea or into an application. Whereas with the pitch, obviously your preparation and your kind of story building happens probably a little bit quicker, because you know you've got a deadline in regards to the actual competition, right? So yeah, in regards to the process of getting to having a film are probably slightly different, but I mean, once you're making a film, it's very similar.
I was going to say, it's probably worth saying as well, so BFI Network Fund is a production fund rather than it doesn't have the same sort of development element that Pitch Fund has in that sense. So you're expected to have a script that is pretty much ready for screen. We do work with people sometimes to sort of develop those scripts a little bit once they've been commissioned, but the majority of the time we're kind of expected to be sort of ready to go in some ways, which what Paul's saying, like we tend to have conversations with people before they apply in a way and can help support people at that stage in terms of developing their ideas and kind of pulling stuff out of it.
Yeah, I suppose that's the difference, right? So BFI are looking for somebody that have a film that you can say, here's some money, go make your film. Whereas the pitch are looking for someone to say, come with an idea, and then we want to make a film with you in regards to the development side of it, because you don't have a script when you apply for the pitch. That comes later. With the BFI, you already want a script, so that's the clear difference in it.
There's a couple of questions in the chat here which I think are relevant in terms of levels of experience as a filmmaker when you're entering the pitch. I've got a question here from David Jason Brown. He says, how is a beginner entering a competition that has a budget limit supposed to know what's achievable within a budget? And to what extent should the writer allow a budget to affect what they produce? That's probably one for Luke and Jackie.
Jackie, do you want to go first?
Okay. That is it's a very good question, and I can understand that if you've not got experience in budgeting, yes, it can be quite complicated and confusing and quite difficult to figure out. But I think what we do tend to find is that people look at the amount on offer and think, wow, that feels like a lot of money, and pitch massive budget films. So I think you can always, I would advise you to always start smaller. And just remember, there are some rules around the pitch whereby we always pay people. So just think about the size of a crew, and if you're going to shoot something for 3 or 4 days, and you're going to pay 20, 25 people over 3 or 4 days, the money's going to go just like that. Similarly, we're going to pay the cast, and also locations, and how many locations are you going into, because every time you move a location, that's a big unit move, and you are losing shooting time for your script. So the more the more time we can spend shooting and putting stuff on the screen, the stronger your project is going to be. But I think if you have a question around that and you've got an idea, then by all means give Luke a call, and if he wants to draw me in, then we can chat about it, and you could say, well, this is my idea, and we'll just go, yeah, if we had £1 million, that would work, but we don't. So let's talk about how we make the smaller version of that.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really helpful. And we have been thinking about that question, so it's a really good one to have in. And my colleague Pete and I have created a short set of videos on our website. You're surprised I mentioned it again. It's sort of stuck record, which is enterthepitch.com, by the way. And one of those is around, okay, so what might I expect to be able to fund at the kind of budget level that we're talking about? So we are trying to answer that this year a little bit in some of the ways that Jackie's referenced, you know, how many locations, how many characters, how many pages. And there are some sort of, they're not the rules of Medes and Persians. They're not kind of fixed forever, but they are kind of guidelines that are quite helpful. If your script is 30 pages long, let me tell you, you're not going to make it for 20k. That's not going to happen. That's just, and don't tell me yes, but it's all action and the way I've written it's all, because it'll all cost. So there are some simple rules that you can look at that will help you with the creation of your idea. And that discipline, by the way, is something that's just helpful for you, even if you're going off to fund your own film or create your own thing, because you're going to have to raise the money and do this somehow. And it's fine to be getting favors from friends if you're starting out and you're just trying to make a first film. But in a sense, it's as hard to win favors for nothing as it is to raise the money to pay people. So those things cut both ways, I think.
I think it is also worth stressing, as Jackie said, that, you know, you can ask questions. If you've come up with an idea and you're like, oh, I don't really know if this is going to work, then ping an email in.
Yeah, call me and then Jackie will give you the answer.
Yeah. Call Luke. He'll put you on hold, make a call on his other phone, and then come back to you.
That's how it works.
But this actually ties to another. I'm going to sort of condense two questions here from Jennifer Bishop, which are really about experience. You know, this is a fund that's talking about targeting emerging filmmakers, but she's wondering if we have never produced or directed our own film but have lots of ideas, whether that means that we're unlikely to be shortlisted.
If it's a good story, it's a good story. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for people with potential who've got a good story to tell. And if you've got a good story, a unique voice, then go for it. We've had people who've won, who've directed, they've written and directed their short, who'd never directed a film before. They directed for the theatre, but they'd never done a film.
And yeah, in a sense, I mean, this isn't supposed to be silly, but Jennifer, if your ideas for stories are as good as your questions, you should definitely submit. Frankly, got good questions, and I always think the best pitches are people who've got questions, who've got something that bothers them, that worries them, that concerns them, that inspires them, that moves them. Those things that kind of tension that Paul talked about actually is what makes a film shine through. I thought that was really excellent what Paul was saying about kind of how he developed the idea, and he'd now beginning to bother him, and he got these tensions within him and so on and so forth. I think when you get to that place, that whatever the project, that's a good place to be.
It's a question for Alex, actually. I think in terms of, it does sound like there's a conversation to be had with when people come in with ideas, but are you also, as much as people are coming in with a good idea, and they are coming with a script, but you must be making an assessment about what type of person they are or what type of filmmaker they're going to be. How are those decisions reached?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we're probably a bit more sort of selective in terms of how we sort of make those decisions about filmmakers. There is an expectation that you do have some form of track record, like I said, have done some kind of work off, you know, your own back, or kind of through smaller funds first, or but just through crowdfunding, whatever, just to kind of show that you've got a passion for filmmaking and that you're kind of out there making work, and that we can see creatively your sort of trajectory in terms of what you want to do. But I think that, yeah, there's still like several stages to our assessment process. The first thing is that the script goes off to a group of script readers who kind of read it individually, externally, outside of BFI, but they don't look at the talent at all. So when it comes down to the talent, that's specifically what talent execs and our roles really is to sort of, majority of the time, about 50% of the applications that come through, we're already connected with the talent. We already know them in some capacity, kind of either been to our events, they've booked one-on-one with us, or they've emailed us, like we've had some contact with them before. And I think, again, it's developing that relationship with the funder, understanding what the funder wants and kind of what they're looking for. So I think that that's the stage where it kind of really helps us. I think we want to see people that are kind of really at that cusp of sort of understanding what their voice is, or kind of maybe they've done a couple of shorts that they're not maybe happy with, or kind of really low budget, but there's something in them that they want to carry forward and they want to take forward, and they just need some money to make it really exciting, to put it on screen and to get that high production value on it, and really push them forward in their career. So we're looking at people just at that point where they just need that extra push, they need that funded short to kind of push them into the festival circuit in front of the right people, so that opens up the doors for them and moving forward. I think that's something in there.
Well, I'm gonna take notes for my next application. There's a question here from David Bryant, which I think will then springboard us into talking about the Hollow's production process. David asks, how deeply into the Bible story should our ideas be linked? Can we take a passage as a theme to use as a springboard? I think that's probably a question for you, Luke, and then Paul, in terms of how you use the passage to go into your script for Hollow, and then we'll go into the making of process of that.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason we exist is that we're interested to see how people engage with this text for today. You know, it's been around for a very long time. It's written by multiple authors. It's got lots of different genres in it. So there isn't a simple answer about that, in the sense that some of the material is wisdom, some is poetry, some is historical, some is letters, for goodness sake. And you can, in fact, Paul happened to land in a letter as it happened. And so what the material is like originally will affect the way you might develop it and adapt it. So something of the pitch is about developing your skill in adaptation. And adaptation famously has been an award-winning format from the get-go, which is why I think they created the original screenplay Oscar, because it was always going to adapted screenplays. So I think you do want to have some engagement with the text. I think thematically is quite a strong thing, although historically the films that seem to have gone in the past have mostly adapted original narrative stories, so they tended to be around that area. But I think what Paul did, which was a thematic passage on revenge and how should you deal with feelings about revenge, is a very interesting one, because it gives the filmmaker a lot of room to say, what's the narrative that will tell this? Here's a piece of thinking around this theme. How can I do that? I hope that helps, David. But again, you know, if you want to ring me, I'll ask Jackie what the answer is and let you know. But that's fine.
So, Paul, you sort of thought, I want to do this story. What was it about the text that got you thinking and then launched you into Hollow?
I think it was, like Luke said, it was the engagement with it and the conflict, the internal conflict that was born from engaging with it. So I think there are two ways. You could say, I want to make a revenge film. Fine, I'll just find a passage about revenge and stick it on the front of me pitch. Job done. Or you can actually use what you find and what you research and what keeps you awake at night as a result of what you find to kind of mold some internal conflict in yourself, because, you know, all good dramas about conflict, and that's fine on the surface and that's fine in your narrative drive. But the thing that's going to really kind of, you know, get down and dirty with is if you personally and internally engage with it. So it was, even though the passage thematically kind of informed the idea and the story and how I was exploring it, it also kind of opened up conversations that I was having with Luke and with Jackie, your brother, for example, like, who's a reverend, by the way. So it was just, the engagement was key for me. And that is what elevated it from a bog standard, you know, the narrative was always there. I knew what the story was, but I didn't necessarily know how deeply I was going to be able to engage with it from a director's point of view. And I kind of need that when I make films and when I write scripts. I need something to keep me awake at night. I need something inside to tear me one way or the other. And that's why me and Laura get on so well, actually, because I think she's quite similar in regards to her acting performances. She needs something to personally grapple with that we can work out together through the prism of filmmaking. And yeah, so that's why, in my case, I feel like kind of the project, I just grew more personally attached to the project via engaging with this one passage. And that one passage grew into a multitude of conversations.
And when you found out that you'd topped the pitch and had the production award, what was the next process? How quickly did you get to draft? How did that work? How did you know, what were your first conversations with Laura then about what you were going to do with the character?
Well, I mean, I always had an outline for the 3-act outline for the narrative of the surface story, which through the process of winning the pitch and developing it with their story consultant and with the guys on the panel and with all the people that I did research with, that started informing what was going on below the outline. Do you know what I mean? And then I just think when I brought Laura into that conversation, even things like, you know, I'm not a woman and it's about a single mother. So even just bringing Laura's perspective in from a parental point of view and a female point of view, again, that just started adding weight to the story, and it started adding kind of layers beneath that central narrative. And then we just kind of picked it apart from there. And to be honest, most of the development didn't come via kind of what do we do and why. It was more, you know, from a structure point of view. It wasn't from a structure point of view or a story point of view. It was just more questions. Like I like development that are built around questions. Like some people don't like to be questioned about their ideas or their script, right? I love it. Ask me all the questions, because if I don't know the answer, then I need to understand why I don't know the answer and find it. And that's what me and Laura do. Laura's always forever asking me questions about why something's in a script, or why an actor or a character does something this way or that way, or why they make a certain decision. And then me and Laura talk and get deep about what the truth of that decision is. And, you know, everyone else fed into that from the pitch. So like me and Luke would have a multitude of conversations about, you know, I'd be writing and just be like, I just need to ring Luke because I need to understand from, you know, Luke's read the Bible a million times, no doubt, or whatever. He knows the Bible inside out. So, and I haven't. So I just needed somebody to talk to, for me to question about this passage, or about the kind of depth to the passage, or why it's there in the first place. And then things Luke would tell me would inspire more questions that then I would go, right, well, I need to think about that. I'll come back at you with something else. And then I'd maybe ring Luke again 2 days later, or I'd talk to Laura and we'd have a conversation about something that me and Luke had a conversation about, or I'd speak to your brother and then I'd speak to Laura and then to Luke, and all this kind of conflict and different approaches to the themes we were exploring just constantly added meat to the bones and weight to the project. And that was just really exciting. So I was flying at that point.
Laura, how common is that for a director to engage like that in terms of talking to you about the character, and how did you go about preparing for what is a very demanding role?
It's not common enough, actually, and like Paul says, yeah, it is. I can't imagine going into a project like Hollow and not asking 1,000,001 questions, and it kept me up at night as well because of those questions. And I was lucky in the sense that I had the time to prepare for the role. I had the time to consider those questions, to ask them, to consider the responses and the replies, to take it all on board. I guess in terms of preparation and dealing with the topic of grief and violence and revenge, and yeah, I mean, they're real deep and dark things that you've got to really ask questions about and get your head around. And I just think, for me, how did I approach that? A few things really. One is just research. reading, a lot of reading, a lot of watching videos, a lot of watching films, a lot of interviews. I spoke to a couple of charities on grief that deal with this day in, day out. It's their job, you know, asked a lot of questions. I managed to find somebody that had been through a similar situation, try to, you know, pick a few brains to get an insight so that I could kind of put that to one side. And then as an actor, it's like, well, how do I bring that to the screen, and how do I put all of that information that I've garnered into the character? And as an actor, well, I can't imagine going into a role without it being a real tangible physical experience. And this one was particularly so. So for me, it was really important from the get-go that I had to kind of physically embody the character. I had to think about grief, and having spoken to some, you know, the charities and individuals about how grief affects them, and that is a very physical manifestation, you know. And I was like, well, how can I get that physical manifestation into what I'm doing? And the only way that I could really do it was something that I could control. And so that was like food for me. And that was, you know, as a human being, it's something that powers you throughout the day. It's constant. When are you fueling your body? And when you're not giving your body something that it desperately craves and wants. So in the case of, say, the character, it was a dead child. For me as an actor, it was food. So I managed to lose about 2 stone for this role, but it wasn't just changing physically how I looked. It was also mentally affecting how I walked, how I wore clothes, how I sat down, how I moved. It was also giving my brain something else to consider, which is, oh my God, I need this thing, which is sugar and food. And for the character, it was, oh my God, I need my, you know, my child that's dead, and I need to kill this guy that's done it. So I can't imagine doing it any other way. I mean, it's different, you know, all roles are different. Some don't require that at all. You know, you're already halfway there. But with this one, it was a lot of digging deep, and I was really lucky that it was Paul I was working with, and I was allowed the time to do that, which was a real luxury. Sometimes you don't get that time, and you've got to work really quick. But no, did I just go on there?
No, that was great. It was great. I mean, it sounds quite grueling, is the only thing. Was it?
It was. Has to be.
Pretty, yeah. But I guess it's a sort of satisfying exhaustion at the end of it. At least one would hope so.
Yes. Yeah, it was, you know, it involved, I had to sit my family down. I had to sit my 2 girls down, and, you know, they're at an age where they're quite vulnerable to that sort of thing. They're 12 and 15. And I had to say, look, mummy's going to do this thing. It means that I'm going to be doing things a bit differently. I'm going to change the way I look a little bit. And this is why. And it's really important that you both understand why. And it's not for any of those other reasons. It's because of this. And then they started asking me questions, you know, which is, it's important. But yeah, it was grueling, and it had to be tiring. And I just couldn't have imagined doing it any other way, really. I loved it, you know. It was great. And,
well, the resulting film really reflects that. It's a terrific performance. So that was, it sounds like it was, you know, you had to put yourself through it. The production itself had to be mounted during all of the COVID restrictions when that was relatively new.
It's 20 hours.
Sorry, that was me. It's 20 hours apparently. I
thought I was going mad. So Jackie, and well, a question for the producers and director, I guess, is how did you, I mean, there's the normal challenge of making a film. What was the biggest challenge in that regard? And then how did you manage it through all the sort of the new COVID restrictions as was? Because this was, when did you shoot? Was it last September?
September.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were fortunate in that things were opening up a little bit at that period. So it wasn't quite as stringent as it had been at some points. But yeah, clearly COVID, it cost us more money. mean, little things like, and also we were trying to do the environmentally sustainable thing. So we, really keen about how we do food and things. And suddenly you're faced with, you have to have everyone's food in individual containers. You've got to travel people either in a bigger vehicle, and so that you can get a few people in one big vehicle, or lots of separate vehicles. So, I mean, it was amazing, and all credit to Luke for really chuntering through the paperwork on all of this, is that we still managed to get the Albert accreditation for sustainability at the end of it, and become a carbon neutral production. But yeah, inevitably there were things that were tricky, and just having to have face masks, but also we were filming out on the streets around Bristol, and that's always an issue when you turn up with a crew and there are lots of people around. But it was brilliant having Paul, who was just so very good at talking to people and engaging with them and getting people on side and helping them understand what we were trying to do and the story we were trying to tell. So yeah, I mean, there were challenges for sure, but as the producer, your job is to figure out what the challenges are and overcome them.
Paul, in terms of how you approach the film visually, I mean, we have a tradition in this country of what is sometimes dismissively called kind of kitchen sink dramas, but they can be kind of visually not that interesting when they're in a urban or domestic setting. But this is a visually very sort of dynamic film. What were your influences, and how did you ensure that it remained visually arresting throughout it?
I mean, that was kind of part of the pitch, to be honest. When I first pitched it, was that, like, don't be fooled by the fact it's set on a council estate. Don't be fooled that it kind of, on the surface, might look like a kitchen sink drama, because we're looking to insert big elements of genre and color and style into this thing, but without that kind of encroaching on all the stuff me and Laura were just talking about. So, I mean, that's conversations with my. Do you know what? Weirdly, before this, I was looking through my my pitch folder before I even did the pitch, and there was a mood reel in there. I'll send it to you. I'm sorry, I'm going off track, but I'll send it to you now. And to Luke and Jackie, and the film. And do you know what? The mood reel looks like it's a trailer for the film almost. Like, you can see the visuals just going from the mood reel straight to the screen. So yeah, we did something right there. But yeah, I just think it's trying to be aware of what the stereotypes are visually, and purposely try and kind of do something a little bit different. It's kind of that simple. I didn't really want any of the style or the visuals to get in the way of the central story or the themes or the tone. And I think all that lot still comes through. But just going through kind of with our DOP and looking for moments to elevate it a little bit visually as well. Especially kind of the shift in Laura's performance. The film kind of shifts visually a little bit as well. So when she's in these moments of revenge mode, we wanted to kind of insert these kind of, there's big smoky backdrops and there's neon lights coming in and all this kind of thing, just to kind of really hammer home that, yes, this is a kitchen sink drama, and we're dealing with kind of like these deep themes about, we're set on a house and estate, we've got people suffering with grief, and everything looks a bit bleak and bland around this character in this story. But then as the elements of revenge thriller start creeping into the film, we just ramped up the style as well to kind of really hammer that point home, that these two things can kind of live side by side and work.
Now have you muted?
Please do trust me with your technical needs. I'm a great filmmaker. I
was like, was that a bad answer? Because Nev's just gone silent.
I've got a question here from Nicoletta Bertoldi. It says, thank you, this is a great event. This is a question for the Pitch Film Fund. You mentioned earlier that if it's a great story that engages you, then it will get your attention. But is there a particular genre that you favour in terms of the inspiration coming from the Bible? For instance, would you be open to being pitched a short live-action musical? I think that's a terrific question in general, but also specifically because of some of the changes that are happening in the fund this year.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for that. And yes, ever since I saw a short film called Suddenly Death, finally a musical in which everyone dies, I've always wished that in which they do. It was brilliant. I thought, I'd really love to do a short musical. That'd be fantastic. But this year we're going to fund 2 short films. They are going to need to be slightly shorter because the fund will be slightly less. It'll just be a modest 20,000 instead of our 35,000. But we're going to do 2 films. One will be a drama and one will be a comedy. And
to clarify, that's 20,000 for each film, yeah?
For each of those, yeah. So, and we are going to look to see what we can do with those funds if we can extend them. But that's essentially what we want to look at, and keeping it concise and neat and small. So, a musical is going to need to come with some definite extra benefits in there, like we've got a pet composer who's already in on it. I am the composer. I've in fact done the music, whatever it is. But I think that the general question, it's interesting because I think that when people come to biblical material, they are naturally a little concerned about, are they going to step on people's toes? And we genuinely welcome submissions from people from all backgrounds and any faith or no faith. But I think there is, because of that concern, it's taken as, right, we must do seriousness, because there isn't obvious comedy flying around everywhere, for example. There's a lot more music, but we don't get music as much. And therefore, I think comedy, and particularly at a time such as this, when we've just come out of a dreadful 18 months, I think comedy is all the more important. And the way actually sometimes we deal with the most difficult things by laughing at them. It's the very things that somehow it helps us to deal with these things. It's I've often found it's the comedic moment in the eulogy to a dead person at a funeral that has been the moment of relief for everybody. The comedic way in which they always left their slippers by the front door or something like that. Obviously funny, not that, but it's the moment when somebody cracks a joke that tension's relieved. So I would welcome some fresh approaches, because I think we have had a lot of, let's do a really serious piece where we all feel very depressed afterwards. And that's no bad comment on Paul at all. but we have had, shall we say, 4 years where we've looked into a dark, deep abyss, and then looked a bit deeper and gone even deeper. And then finally we've gone really, really deep. But anyway, there you go. That's just a thought about these things. There is a way of doing something that's uplifting as well as confronting real issues.
But when you say there's going to be a film that's a comedy and a film that's a drama, that is like, there's that kind of a tonal thing. So there are subgenres within that. So you could do like a comedy horror or a dramatic sci-fi, something like that.
Absolutely. The Shaun of the Dead version is just as welcome as the horror version of that. But we've tended to kind of, so I think those subgenres exist in both categories. Yeah. So it could allow you to do all sorts of things, and the musical might be serious, and therefore a subgenre of the drama side rather than a subgenre of the comedy side. I don't know where that's going as a suggestion, but please submit a musical. That would make my day.
Now we're coming fairly close to the end of our time. There's still quite a few questions, but some of them have been covered in previous answers. If there's stuff that you feel like, oh man, they didn't ask my question and I wish I knew, then please do email in. You can email info@enterthepitch.com. But I wanted to finish with asking everyone here what they wish they'd known, either about pitching or about navigating the industry in general. What do they know now which they wish they'd known when they started out? Don't all rush to answer this question at once.
Who's going first? Come on.
Go first. Go on, Paul. You do it.
I think for me, it was a personal thing of you're not pitching to the enemy. So that's the first thing you need to get in your head. And I just think that trust your own prep. So if you've done all your prep and you know the answer to every question that might fly at you, and you've got that locked in, then you can't really go wrong. you can still not win, but you can't really go wrong. Like, it's your film and it's your vision, and if you can trust that and gain confidence from the trust in that, then you can't really go far wrong. So yeah, I don't think I would be as nervous doing it again in a similar situation, because yeah, it's just gaining confidence and trust in your own vision and your own prep. If you genuinely put the work in, then you are genuinely going to be okay. If you have to be honest with yourself, if you haven't put the work in, then those nerves are probably belonging to your knowledge of that rather than a lack of confidence.
Great answer. And no one else wants to follow it.
No, I'm happy to
Okay, shoot.
say something. I mean, it's similar to what Laura was saying earlier about when you prep and if you feel it's right, having the confidence in what you feel is right. And I years ago, I used to do big live event production, and I had a young man who did the graphics for some of the shows. And I remember one day him showing me something, and I said, no, that's not what I'm looking for. Can you try that again? And I said to him later, did you mind me being critical of that? And he said, no, because he said, I don't think what I did was wrong. I believe in what I did. It's just, it didn't fit with what you were looking for. And I thought that was a really mature attitude to take. And I've always remembered that. And I think, yeah, it's like Laura said, you prep, you do what you think is right. If it's not what people are looking for, that does not make it wrong. Just means you're not quite where they're at that point. So yeah, have that confidence.
Agreed with that as well, definitely.
Yeah, I think our job as funders really is almost to believe in people and believe in talent, and to do that you need to believe in yourself. as cliched as that is, you know, you need to kind of fully sort of you can move yourself and sort of take responsibility of doing that, rather than leaving that to the funders. You know, really it's you're the driver of your own work in the long run.
I can't imagine how you couldn't not be the driver of your own work. Like, how can you put something forward that you don't 100,000,001% are passionate about? Because where did it all come from otherwise? Like, you know, you've got to just work on something that you can't stop thinking about, and you just have to get up and put it down because you can't get it out of your head. I don't know. You know, you shouldn't be writing or doing anything for anybody else. It's got to feel right, hasn't it, for you? Unless, of course, someone's paying you a lot of money. Then you will.
Then you can find the passion.
Then you'll find the passion. Yeah. What do you want? Yeah.
I think I've learned that I know Rick Snyder for Save the Cat comes in for a lot of stick in some ways, but he says that you need to have a single line. I think you've got a great phrase somewhere, Nev, that you once said to us on camera. Probably we can probably show a picture of you looking very youthful, saying, "I like an idea that you can hold in the palm of your hand," or maybe that was.
I was ripping off Steven Spielberg.
Oh, were you? Oh, cool. Well, I'm glad I remembered it then. So there you go. Ripping off Spielberg there, and I think I've learned that complexity comes from having that clarity, and sometimes I wish people could come with that. What I've learned from the process is I wish I could get hold of more funds sooner, further, farther, because I absolutely love the process. I love the people who come to us, and I'd love to be able to back more ideas. So that's the thing that keeps me up at night, is how can we do more of this and back more creative ideas, because I love the process and I love the journey it goes on. The journey is the destination.
Yeah, I think it is a journey. I've had enough meetings which I thought were going to change my life one way or another, and they didn't, even if they went well. Forms you. You're making a life. You're not just making a career. So it's good to invest in this stuff, and it's a great community here of people who will support you. But don't be discouraged.
Oh dear.
Oh, I think we're losing you, Nev.
That's the internet telling us that I'm talking nonsense and we should go.
Okay. Thank you. No, I was going to say, so everyone who's attended, you will get an email afterwards with links to all of the funds and kind of follow-up feedback form if anyone has any time to fill that out for us. That'd be really helpful. And the way of getting in touch with the Pitch Fund if you want to kind of put your questions to them. So that will all ping its way to you tomorrow.
Alex, is there a way I can go on typing a few answers to some of these questions after the end of the session, or will that die with Zoom? Is that the end of it?
We'll die with Zoom, but hopefully these ideas and questions are in their heads, so hopefully they will have the email address and can just pass them along to you.
Okay, do that, folks. I'm very sorry I didn't type more answers, partly out of fear that I'd suddenly be asked a question and be busy typing something, but my email is now going to be in the chat stream, so copy it and send me it. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here today. And thanks, Ned, for hosting. Really appreciate that. You did a really great job.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, everyone. Hope you enjoyed
Bye,
it.
everyone.
Cheers, everyone. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.